The Admonitions of the Instructress to the Court Ladies, Nushi Zen 2, is one of the earliest extant surviving hand scrolls of figure painting on silk in the history of Chinese art. It is regarded as the opening scroll painting, Kaiju Wanji 2, and holds landmark significance in the development of Chinese painting. The work was originally created by the Eastern Jin dynasty painter Gu Kaiji, based on the text Admonitions of the Instructress written by Zhang Hua. Dating back more than 1,600 years, the original composition is believed to have consisted of 12 sections corresponding to the 12 passages of the text. The extant version preserved in the British Museum is a Tang Dynasty copy comprising 9 sections. The original painting has been lost. The painting measures 24.8 centimeters in height and 38.2 centimeters in length. It is executed on silk using the refined ancient silken thread drawing, Gaogu Yusi Miao technique, with pale and understated mineral coloration. Over the centuries, it passed through the collections of the Song, Ming, and Qing dynasties. It was recorded in Emperor Huizong of Song's Xuanhe Huapu, catalog of painting of the Xuanhe era, and was highly valued by the Qianlong Emperor of the Qing dynasty, who inscribed colophons on it. During the invasion of the Eight-Nation Alliance in 1900, it was looted from the Summer Palace by British troops and subsequently acquired by the British Museum at a low price. Since then, in the collection of the British Museum, it has undergone a series of contested interventions, including segmented mounting, controversial restoration practices, and exposure to excessive light. The most distinctive technique of the scroll is the ancient silken thread drawing, Gaogu Yusi Miao. The lines are fine, resilient, and evenly sustained, continuous without interruption, resembling silkworms spinning silk in spring. They are rounded yet upright, executed with a centered brush, maintaining even pressure and a restrained internal force. This line drawing method was later classified as the foremost of the 18 methods of line drawing, representing Gu Kaiji's major advancement upon earlier linear depiction. The drapery of the figures flows naturally and fluidly. Garments are broad and loose, with a strong sense of movement, yet without rigidity or artificiality. Gu Kaiji's theories of using form to convey spirit, Yixing Sheshen, and transmitting spirit through depiction, Chuan Shen Chejiao, are fully realized in this scroll. The figures possess rounded faces, phoenix-like elongated eyes, and composed, restrained expressions. Although neither joyful nor sorrowful, subtle postures, gazes, and gestures convey inner moral character and cultivated virtue. Professor Wen Fong observed that the volumetric modeling of figures in the Tang copy may have been influenced by Zhang Sengyo's convex-concave painting, Ao Tu Hua, while still preserving Gu Kaiji's stylistic features of tight, continuous, and meticulously structured brushwork, resulting in a cylindrical, three-dimensional bodily form. The composition adopts a single scene format. Each section forms an independent scene, yet the hand scroll format produces a continuous narrative rhythm through sequential unfolding. The spatial treatment is early in development, yet highly innovative. Hierarchical relationships among figures are clearly defined, backgrounds are minimal, and the main subjects are emphasized. The coloring is understated and elegant, primarily ink lines supported by light washes of color, retaining freshness and refinement even after a millennium. The material of the hand scroll is silk with mineral pigment, silk-based polychrome painting, which is a crucial source of its artistic and historical value. Early Chinese paintings predominantly used silk as a support, which is finer and smoother than later paper supports, allowing it to better sustain delicate silken thread, line work, and subtle coloration. The woven structure of silk enables smoother line movement and strong pigment adherence, but it also creates significant preservation challenges. It is prone to brittleness, sensitive to light, and vulnerable to folding damage. Conservation records at the British Museum indicate that the original silk has become extremely fragile, with extensive cracking of the fibers. Around 2014, conservation specialists, including Chu Jin Xian, employed a mixed paste adhesive under microscopic conditions to reinforce the work incrementally, preserving its historical traces. The material properties of silk make Admonitions Scroll an invaluable physical specimen for studying early textile technology, pigment composition, and the evolution of mounting practices. During the Qianlong period of the 18th century, it was remounted, and Zhou Yigi was ordered to supplement missing sections with painted reconstruction. Compared with contemporaneous works, its silk-based polychrome style preserves the legacy of the Six Dynasties period. The colors are not overly saturated, instead pursuing spirit resonance and living vitality, Qiyun Shengdong, reflecting the Wei Jin aesthetic ideal of clarity, simplicity, and metaphysical distance. Appraisers across successive dynasties highly affirmed the artistic achievement of Admonitions of the Instructress to the Court Ladies. Although the work originally served Confucian didactic purposes, it successfully transcends mere moral instruction to become an artwork that offers aesthetic delight and visual pleasure. It marks the transformation of Chinese figure painting from the simple forms of the Han Dynasty toward the Wei Jin aesthetic of spiritual likeness, laying the foundation for the later peak of figure painting in the Tang and Song dynasties. As the earliest extant physical example of a silk hand scroll, it provides an irreplaceable primary material for the study of early Chinese painting. In sum, the artistic value of Admonitions of the Instructress to the Court Ladies lies in its position as a critical turning point in Chinese painting's evolution from utilitarian function to aesthetic autonomy. It represents the perfect integration of linear artistry, the pursuit of spiritual resonance, and material technological refinement. Scholarly consensus across generations holds that it is not only a quintessential representation of Gu Kaiji's style, but also an enduring masterpiece in the history of Chinese art. Despite its turbulent fate, its artistic brilliance has traversed millennia and remains deeply valued within the global art world today. Admonitions of the Instructress to Court Ladies, Nushi Zhen 2, survives today in 9 sections. It is composed in a single scene format, unfolding from right to left. Each section is accompanied on its right-hand side or adjacent margin by corresponding passages from Zhang Hua's Admonitions of the Instructress to Court Ladies, creating a complementary relationship between image and text, and constituting one of the defining characteristics of early Chinese narrative painting. Section 1, Feng Yuan, Defending Against the Bear. Inscription: The black bear climbed upon the railing. Feng Yuan advanced. Was she without fear? She knew death and yet did not begrudge it. The opening scene presents an intense moment of crisis. A black bear climbs over a barrier, directly threatening Emperor Yuan of Han. Attendants beside the emperor scatter in terror. Guards thrust spears toward the bear, their expressions panicked. Feng Yuan, consort Feng, steps forward, placing herself between the emperor and the black bear. Her posture is upright, her robes slightly lifted by motion. Her face is rounded yet resolute. This stands in stark contrast to the surrounding chaos. The story derives from an incident during the Jianzhong era of Emperor Yuan of Han, when a beast performance at court went out of control. A black bear broke loose and Feng Yuan, without fear of danger, protected the emperor. The inscription directly praises her courage as knowing death, yet not begrudging it. This is the most dramatically charged scene in the scroll, where contrasts in bodily movement emphasize tension, highlighting women's loyalty and decisiveness in moments of peril. It disrupts the image of women as merely delicate and passive, revealing a dimension of heroic devotion within the Confucian ideal of female virtue. Section 2, Ban Jieyu refusing the imperial carriage inscription. Lady Ban had her refusal, relinquishing the joy of riding together. Was it that she did not cherish it? She guarded against the subtle and considered the distant. 8 palace attendants carry a sedan chair. Emperor Cheng of Han sits within it, turning his head back. Beside him, another consort shares the carriage. On the right side of the carriage, Ban Jieyu stands upright in dignified refusal, declining the invitation to ride together. Her expression is calm yet firm, her posture conveying an unassailable moral integrity, sharply contrasting with the figures within the carriage. The story originates from Emperor Cheng's desire to travel together with Ban Jieyu, which she politely refused, advising the emperor to draw near virtuous ministers rather than indulge in sensual pleasure. The inscription emphasizes her wisdom in propriety and foresight in preventing misconduct at its earliest stage. The composition is highly refined with a clear contrast between motion and stillness, Meaning is conveyed through gaze and bodily posture, expressing self-restraint and long-term vision. It serves as a canonical example of Confucian female virtue and political moral instruction frequently cited in later tradition. Section 3, Landscape Allegory of Principal Inscription. There is no prosperity that does not decline, no fullness that does not wane. When the sun reaches its zenith, it begins to set. When the moon is full, it begins to diminish. What accumulates like dust will collapse. What declines comes like a sudden mechanism. This section shifts toward allegorical expression. Amid layered mountains and peaks, sun and moon appear together. Within the landscape, hunters draw bows while birds and beasts flee. The imagery symbolizes the principle that extreme prosperity inevitably leads to decline, advising court women to remain vigilant in times of stability and guard against subtle dangers from the outset. The inscription visualizes abstract philosophical reasoning, functioning as a transitional passage within the scroll. It also demonstrates an early attempt in figure painting to incorporate landscape elements into narrative structure. Section 4, Cultivation of Appearance and Nature. Inscription. All people know how to cultivate their appearance, but none know how to cultivate their nature. If nature is not cultivated, it may lead to transgression of ritual propriety. Refine and polish it, and one may attain sagehood. The scene turns to daily life within the palace. Several women are engaged in grooming and adornment. One sits before a bronze mirror, contemplating her reflection, while a maid arranges her high coiffure. On the other side, utensils and furnishings are arranged in orderly fashion, creating an atmosphere of elegance and tranquility. The figure's garments are rendered with fluid lines, ribbons flowing softly, presenting the refined demeanor of aristocratic women in the Beijing period. Section 5, Suspicion within Shared Bedding Inscription. If one's words are good, they will be answered even from 1,000 miles away. But if one deviates from this principle, even those sharing the same bedding will fall into suspicion. The inscription warns that improper speech leads to mistrust, such that even those sharing the same bed may harbor divergent dreams. It emphasizes the necessity of caution in speech within courtly emotional relations, revealing the fragility and subtle instability of interpersonal bonds. Section 6, Family Reunion and Moral Reflection. Inscription. The words of a husband are subtle, yet honor and disgrace arise from them. Do not think of them as obscure, for the spiritual gaze has no form. Do not think of them as distant, for the divine hearing has no sound. Do not take pride in your honor, for the heavenly way diminishes excess. Do not rely on your nobility, for what rises will also fall. Observe the small stars and take warning from their course. Align your heart with the locust tree, and your lineage will multiply. This section primarily presents a harmonious and auspicious family gathering, conveying a scene of domestic concord and moral instruction. Section 7, Excessive Favor and the Danger of Overindulgence. Inscription. Joy must not be indulged without restraint. Favor must not be monopolized. Excessive concentration breeds neglect. Extreme affection leads to reversal. Fullness necessarily brings loss. This is an inherent principle. Observe the patterns of the heavens above and examine the patterns of the earth below. Those who rely on status will inevitably fall. Conduct and trust arise from words and deeds. One must be cautious even in the smallest speech, for it manifests in what may be praised. A man and woman stand facing one another. The man raises his hand in a gesture of refusal, while the woman appears slightly imploring. The scene conveys subtle emotional shifts. The inscription warns that favor must not be excessive or monopolized, as it leads to change and instability. Affection, when carried to its extreme, cannot endure. This section offers a restrained admonition against rivalry for favor and the dangers inherent in courtly affection. In the Admonitions of the Instructress to Court Ladies preserved in the British Museum, the 8th section, often referred to as the seated meditation scene, presents a highly significant philological and art historical phenomenon of textual dislocation. In the extant hand scroll, the inscription appears in a continuous form as, "People all know how to adorn their appearance, yet none know how to cultivate their nature. If one does not cultivate one's nature, how can one remain unaware of spiritual transformation? To dissolve the form and to refine it as jade brings auspiciousness. With composed reverence and self-reflection, prosperity and honor are what one may ultimately attain. In reality, this passage represents a conflation of two originally distinct textual units. Such an arrangement is not attributable to Gu Kaiji's original pictorial conception, but rather resulted from later transmission, during which physical damage or remounting interventions necessitated compensatory reconstruction of missing textual continuity. It is highly likely that portions of the original text and/or painting were lost due to deterioration. During subsequent restoration and remounting processes, in order to preserve narrative continuity and visual integrity, mounting specialists or conservators merged two originally separate passages into a single continuous inscription. While this intervention introduces a rupture in literary logic, it functionally filled a spatial void created by material loss within the scroll. The two originally distinct narrative units correspond respectively to the opening motif concerning the adornment of appearance and the concluding motif concerning introspective self-cultivation. According to comparison with Zhanghua's original admonitions of the instructress to court ladies and the Song Dynasty copy preserved in the Palace Museum, these two textual segments originally belonged to separate sections with a substantial intervening passage of several dozen characters. In the 7th section, the inscription was originally intended to conclude at "refined as jade, auspicious." The corresponding pictorial content depicts women before a mirror engaging in grooming and adornment, functioning as a moral admonition that cultivating nature is superior to cultivating appearance. In the standard version of the 8th section, the inscription should begin with, "The beautiful consider themselves beautiful, yet lightly pursue what is base. Attentive and cautious, therein lies the source of blessing," and conclude with, "Composed reverence and self-reflection, prosperity and honor are what one may ultimately attain." The corresponding pictorial scene depicts women seated in quiet contemplation. Due to this conflation, the phrase "composed reverence and self-reflection, prosperity and honor are what one may ultimately attain" becomes directly attached to the discourse on inner moral cultivation. This forced editorial intervention inadvertently intensifies the didactic force of the composition. It explicitly instructs the viewer that only through cultivating one's nature and self-reflection may one ultimately attain honor and prosperity. From a scholarly perspective, this detail represents one of the most evocative material testimonies of the British Museum version as a Tang Dynasty copy. It is not only a preservation of Gu Kaiji's pictorial lineage, but also a physical record of the scroll's long history of damage, restoration, and successive reinterpretation. A consort is shown seated in contemplative stillness, her posture restrained and inward-looking. The inscription emphasizes that only through quiet propriety, respectful conduct, and vigilant self-examination may one attain honor. The composition is visually simplified, foregrounding the culmination of inner moral cultivation. Section 9, the female historian recording admonitions inscription. The female historian records the admonitions, respectfully addressing them to all court ladies. This final section serves as the conclusion of the entire scroll. The female historian is depicted holding a brush and writing the admonitory text, while two palace ladies are shown walking together, one of whom gently touches her chest as if in inward reflection. The inscription clarifies the overarching purpose. The female historian records these moral injunctions and boldly presents them to all women of the court as a model for reflection. This concluding section elevates the narrative into a universal moral framework. Across the 9 sections, the scroll progresses in layered sequence, from heroic exempla to philosophical warnings to scenes of daily life, and finally to the culmination of moral instruction and ethical transcendence, thereby constructing a complete system of Confucian female virtue. Although the work serves an explicitly didactic function, its sophisticated pictorial execution allows the figures to embody a collective image of dignity and refinement, transcending mere moral instruction and achieving the status of enduring artistic expression. The year 1900 marked a decisive turning point in the fate of the admonitions of the instructress to court ladies. In that year, the Boxer Uprising coincided with the invasion of China by the Eight-Nation Alliance, plunging Beijing into unprecedented chaos. Countless imperial treasures from the Forbidden City and the royal gardens were systematically looted. This national treasure, which Emperor Qianlong had regarded as one of the four beauties, was also removed from the Qing court during this catastrophe, never to return to China. After the Qianlong reign, the Admonitions Scroll was long preserved within the Jingishuan Western Chamber of the Jianyufang Garden in the Forbidden City, alongside the other so-called Three Beauties, all of which were kept as imperial treasures. During the late Qing period under Empress Dowager Cixi, it was transferred to the Summer Palace, Yiheyuan, for storage, either for ease of viewing or for protective relocation, a point now broadly accepted in current scholarship. In the summer of 1900, forces from Britain, the United States, Russia, Japan, France, Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary launched a large-scale invasion under the pretext of relieving the besieged legations. On the 14th of August, the Allied forces captured Beijing and subsequently carried out extensive retaliatory looting. The Summer Palace, as a Qing imperial garden complex, became a primary site of British military occupation and was partially burned and ransacked, resulting in the massive dispersal of imperial collections. The British 1st Bengal Lancers were stationed there for an extended period under the stated purpose of maintaining order. In practice, this entailed systematic appropriation of valuables. The individual who physically removed the Admonitions Scroll was Captain Clarence Arnold Keatinge Johnson of the British Indian Army's 1st Bengal Lancers. He arrived in Beijing around August 1900 and remained for approximately 2 months. His unit was stationed in and around the Summer Palace. There are two principal accounts regarding how he acquired the painting. According to a brief note written in 1985 by his daughter Betty Manzano to the British Museum, Johnson reportedly encountered during the turmoil a noblewoman of the Qing aristocracy and her family in a dangerous situation and escorted them to safety. In gratitude, the woman allegedly gifted him the scroll. However, the majority of scholars consider this gift hypothesis highly implausible and even likely a narrative constructed by the occupying forces to obscure acts of looting. The reasons include: the Admonitions Scroll was a highly restricted imperial treasure under strict control of the Imperial Household Department, Neiwufu, making it virtually impossible for an ordinary palace woman to possess and freely dispose of it. During wartime, there are extensive historical records documenting systematic looting by British forces at the Summer Palace, far exceeding any isolated acts of fortuitous benevolence. Johnson himself never provided verifiable specifics such as the identity of the noblewoman, precise dates or locations, and such familial accounts only appeared much later, lacking contemporaneous evidence. In addition, further details suggest that Major Noel Desbray and his small detachment were deployed to take control of the Summer Palace, and although Johnson's name does not appear among the principal official occupation leadership, as a serving officer, he would have had ample opportunity to access imperial holdings. In 1902, Johnson returned to London. At that time, he appears to have had no awareness of the artistic or historical significance of the scroll, focusing instead on the finely crafted jade finials at both ends of the mounting, which he believed might have monetary value. In early 1903, he brought the scroll to the British Museum, requesting that staff assess the jade ornaments. Sidney Colvin, then keeper of prints and drawings at the British Museum, together with his assistant Lawrence Binion, immediately recognized it as a masterpiece of Chinese painting history. After brief negotiations on the 8th of April 1903, the museum formally acquired the work for £25. At the time, this sum was equivalent to several £1,000s in modern value, yet remained an extraordinarily low price for a work of such significance. Johnson accepted the offer. This transaction is clearly documented in the British Museum archives and has become the institutional basis for its legal acquisition, while simultaneously fixing the painting's fate as one of irreversible displacement. When Johnson removed it, the scroll was likely still in the form of a complete hand scroll. He appears to have regarded it merely as an antique scroll with jade fittings. Some scholars suggest he may have obtained it through local intermediaries or direct searching within military encampments. Others point to the existence of informal art markets within the occupying forces, through which numerous treasures circulated via officers' private channels. A minority view speculates, without direct evidence, the possibility of higher-level tacit approval within the occupying structure. In comparison with other acts of plunder, a vast number of Qing imperial paintings, ceramics, and jade objects were seized and distributed among the Allied powers during the same period. The Admonitions of the Instructress to Court Ladies was only one among many such losses, yet it stands out with particular poignancy due to its exceptional status as a masterpiece of Chinese painting. After entering the collection of the British Museum, the painting did not immediately enter a stable phase of preservation. On the contrary, as a hand scroll originating from an ancient Eastern civilization, it was subjected to treatment fundamentally different from traditional Chinese conservation philosophy. At the time of acquisition, the scroll was already in a fragile condition. Having passed through more than a millennium of transmission, the silk support bore multiple traces of earlier repairs, with age-related deterioration of the fibers, making it highly susceptible to creasing, tearing, and pigment loss. The conservation staff at the British Museum at that time lacked a deep understanding of the traditional Chinese practice of handling hand scrolls through repeated unrolling and rolling. They believed that frequent manipulation would accelerate deterioration. In 1912, the museum first commissioned the Japanese painters Sugisaki Hiaki and Urushihara Mokuchu to produce 100 woodblock reproductions for study and exhibition purposes. From 1914 to 1915, and in some respects continuing until 1923, the museum undertook a major intervention on the original work. Under the direction of the conservator Stanley Littlejohn, and drawing upon Japanese folding screen, Biubu techniques, the originally continuous hand scroll was physically separated and remounted on rigid supports. The operation was carried out as follows. The scroll was divided into three components. One, the painting core, comprising the 9 principal pictorial sections measuring approximately 348 centimeters in length and 25 centimeters in height, was separately mounted on panel supports. 2, later additions, including historical colophons and Qing imperial inscriptions, such as those by Emperor Qianlong, measuring approximately 329 centimeters in length, were mounted separately. 3, the supplementary painting Pine, Bamboo, Rock, and Spring Water, Songju Shiquan Tu attributed to Zhou Yigui, measuring approximately 74 centimeters, was also separated and preserved independently. In this process, the main pictorial section was detached from its preceding and trailing colophons and mounting papers, Qianshou, Yintou, and Tuowei, and transferred onto wooden panels or rigid supports, displayed in a flattened format akin to Western easel painting. The mounting components, including the leading section and portions of the trailing section, were remounted separately. The purpose of this intervention was, firstly, to allow Western viewers to appreciate the work in a flat, painting-like format similar to oil paintings, and secondly, to reduce physical damage caused by repeated rolling and unrolling of the fragile silk. Clarissa von Spee, a scholar in the Asian department of the British Museum, later explained that flat panel mounting would reduce the risk of wrinkling and fiber fracture of the silk surface. This act of disassembly has long been a subject of sustained controversy among Chinese scholars and connoisseurs. Yang Xin, former deputy director of the Palace Museum, noted after closely examining the work in 2001 that such treatment brutally destroyed the integrity of the hand scroll format and its traditional logic of transmission and viewing. A large number of Ming and Qing colophons were physically cut away, creating a rupture in historical continuity. In traditional Chinese practice, the act of unrolling a hand scroll is itself a ritualized narrative experience. Once fragmented, this temporal and spatial ritual is entirely lost. In addition, the 1914 restoration introduced another latent hazard. The conservator applied a thin film-like coating to the surface of the painting, likely an acidic substance such as cellulose acetate, intended to stabilize and protect the silk. While the intention was preservation, over time the acidic material contributed to further embrittlement, cracking, and powdering of the silk fibers, producing visible signs of severe aging and nearly causing irreversible damage. The British Museum has since acknowledged that, at the time, knowledge of East Asian painting conservation was limited, and that such interventions are, from a contemporary perspective, clearly constrained by the understanding of the period. Nevertheless, these measures did allow the work to survive in a relatively stable condition and to be exhibited in a limited capacity throughout the 20th century. Entering the 21st century, the condition of the painting once again deteriorated. The British Museum attached great importance to this issue and convened an international symposium in the summer of 2013, inviting leading global experts in painting conservation and scholarship to assess the situation. The conclusion was that a complete remounting would require full disassembly, which would fatally damage the already fragile silk. Only conservative stabilization within the existing structural framework was deemed feasible. Ultimately, the museum invited senior Chinese conservator Chu Jinxian to lead the restoration. Chu, affiliated with the Shanghai Museum and with extensive experience working in the United Kingdom, carried out the intervention with her team in 2014. Traditional Chinese conservation paste made from wheat flour was initially considered, but the museum expressed concern that residual gluten could harm the silk. Chu proposed a mixed adhesive system combining Japanese deglutenized starch paste with a chemically stabilized adhesive solution, achieving both sufficient adhesion and the avoidance of visible residue. The mixture was rigorously tested and approved through laboratory analysis prior to use. Working under a microscope, the team applied reinforcement incrementally, millimeter by millimeter, over the course of 2 months. Simultaneously, retouching was carried out using mineral pigments such as gamboge, cinnabar, and ink to repair losses and faded areas, ensuring smooth visual transitions with the original surface. After restoration, the silk support was significantly stabilized and the overall condition of the painting was greatly improved. According to Chu Jinxian, the work is now stable enough to be preserved for another 100 to 200 years. The intervention did not alter the flat panel mounting system, as repeated rolling and unrolling would in fact pose greater risks of damage. After restoration, the painting was installed in a custom-built climate-controlled display case manufactured in Germany. Due to its extreme sensitivity to light, it is now exhibited for only approximately 6 weeks per year, typically during periods such as the Mid-Autumn Festival, the Lunar New Year, or Asian art festivals. For the remainder of the year, it is kept in storage. The century-long history of the admonitions of the instructress to court ladies at the British Museum is marked by profound contradictions. While the segmented mounting has been criticized as a misunderstanding of cultural tradition and an irreversible act of destruction, it nonetheless, given the technical constraints of its time, arguably extended the physical survival of the object to a certain extent. The early acidic protective coating caused secondary damage, whereas the 21st century Sino-Western collaborative conservation reflects both the advancement and the increasing caution of contemporary heritage preservation practices. However, the work can no longer be appreciated in China as a continuous hand scroll being slowly unrolled in its original ritualized manner. This represents a permanent loss at the level of cultural context and effective experience. Throughout its transmission history, the Admonitions Scroll accumulated a rich corpus of collector seals and colophons which serve not only as material traces of its authenticity, but also as evidence of its prestigious provenance. From its inclusion in the Northern Song Imperial Collection, it entered the highest echelon of collecting, passed through private hands in the Ming and Qing dynasties, and ultimately entered the Qing imperial court, becoming one of Emperor Qianlong's most treasured possessions. The earliest reliable documentary record appears in the Northern Song dynasty. During the Xuanhe era of Emperor Huizong, the scroll was already recorded in the imperial collection and explicitly attributed to Gu Kaiji in the Xuanhe Huapu, imperial catalog of painting of the Xuanhe reign. It bears imperial seals such as Zhengye, Xuanhe, and imperial calligraphy, Yushu. In the Southern Song period, it remained within court collections and carries seals such as Shaoxing, an imperial library seal, Neifu Tushuji Yin. It was also at one point in the possession of the powerful minister Jia Sidao, whose seal Qihuo Tushu Yin is visible on the surface. These Song dynasty seals indicate that the Admonitions Scroll was already regarded as a supreme imperial treasure during the Song period. In the Ming dynasty, the scroll circulated among prominent private collectors. In the mid-Ming period, it passed successively through the hands of Wang Ao and Yan Song. After Yan Song's political downfall, it briefly entered official circulation before passing to He Longjun and Gu Kongyi. The great Ming collector Xiang Yuanbian was particularly devoted to the work, affixing more than 50 collector seals, forming the most densely inscribed layer of Ming collecting marks on the scroll. Subsequently, noted connoisseurs and painters such as Dong Qichang, Zhang Chou, Zhang Xiaoxi, and Da Zhongguang examined and inscribed the work. In the late Ming and early Qing period, it further passed into the collections of Liang Qingbiao and An Qi, both high officials and wealthy salt merchants. These private collections not only enriched the scroll with successive layers of colophons and seals, but also ensured its wide circulation within literati circles, greatly enhancing its reputation. In the early Qing dynasty, the scroll was ultimately acquired from An Qi into the imperial Qing collection, becoming one of Emperor Qianlong's most highly prized paintings. In the 11th year of Qianlong's reign, 1746, it underwent a careful remounting. The emperor personally inscribed the frontispiece with the title Floral Grace of the Vermilion Brush, Tongguan Fang, and painted a single spray of orchids in the mounting interleaf, accompanied by a poem. In the leisure of a long summer day, I happened to view Gu Kaiji's Admonitions Scroll, and thus painted a solitary orchid, taking its elegant resemblance as inspiration. At the end of the scroll, he left an extended colophon praising Gu Kaiji's mastery of transmitting spirit through depiction, Chuanshen Xiejiao, lamenting that after more than 1,000 years of transmission, the painting still appeared as though its spirit and vitality were freshly alive. Qianlong not only wrote inscriptions and painted orchids himself, but also commissioned the court painter Zhou Yigi to add an auxiliary painting, pine, bamboo rock, and spring water, at the end of the scroll. He grouped this work together with paintings attributed to Li Gonglin's Wandering in the Xiao and Xiang rivers, Brocade views of Shu rivers and mountains, and Zhang Wo's 9 songs, designating them collectively as the Four Beauties. A special chamber in the Jingyishuan garden of the Jianfu Palace, within the Forbidden City, was established for their exclusive appreciation, named Chamber of the Four Perfections, Simeiju. In Qianlong's view, the Admonitions Scroll ranked first among the Four Beauties, symbolizing an ideal union of antiquity and artistic perfection. Over his lifetime, he affixed as many as 37 imperial seals to the work, demonstrating the depth of his attachment. After Qianlong's reign, the Admonitions Scroll, together with the other works of the Four Beauties, remained in the Jianfu Palace garden of the Forbidden City. In the late Qing period, under Empress Dowager Cixi, it was transferred to the Summer Palace for storage, where it remained until the arrival of the Eight-Nation Alliance in 1900.